Was Jesus a Buddhist monk? New BBC documentary strongly suggests that he was. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower. Welcome to the Gospel Truth channel. And we've got an interesting thing to take a look at today. Was Jesus a Buddhist monk? Well, let's look, let's see, and let's see what the evidence says. Now, if you're new to this channel, I appreciate you being here. I salute you for being here and seeking after truth. If you're not new to this channel and you're a regular listener, I, of course, appreciate you very, very much. And I hope that you'll keep coming back. And I do ask that you consider meditatively whether you should financially support this work. You can click the super chat $ below for instant support, or you can go to my website, which is www.jeffreydaugherty.com, and donate via PayPal. You don't even have to have a PayPal account in order to do that. So let's take a look at this idea that Jesus spent many years in Tibet being a Buddhist monk. Now, I have to tell you that most of these things that come up with what Jesus was doing, when and where, and the time, the missing years of Jesus and all that stuff, most of this comes from perpetrating and perpetuating the idea that Jesus was real. Jesus was not real. Jesus was not real. Most of this comes from having to find what happened to Jesus between the time he was born till the time he was 12, from the time he was 12 till the time he was in his 30s and appeared as the Messiah. Well, the Apostle John told us, and I've taught exclusively on this channel, that Jesus was not real. Jesus was a created figure, created in order to suppress and push the Christ into the background and to create a straw man that the Lord, the rat bastard, Yahweh, Jehovah, the false, fallen, flawed, failed God of the Bible could leverage in days to come as he attempts to make a second coming false flag to take over the earth. All of that is exhaustively documented on this channel. If you want to get into all of that, probably the easiest and best way to do is, again, you just go to the channel, Jeff Daugherty YouTube. And once you're at the Jeff Daugherty YouTube, look, Jeff is live right now with Jesus, Buddhist monk. Probably one of the best places to start is right here. If you see, here's the current videos. This was a great show with R. Wayne Steiger and Barbara DeLong. You just go down here underneath and you start getting into my sections, the basics, all the information, create yourself, New Testament now corrupted. If you really want to start getting into who is Jesus, who is the Lord who we think he is? Jesus fallacies, Bethlehem, 2 second coming. These are the real meat and potatoes, blood sacrifice and saviors. That's where you really want to go to, and that's what you really want to get into. If you want to get into the proof that Jesus was not real, that the Lord is not who you think he is, and that the Christ came as a fully grown man. I mean, you can do stuff like this. Jeff Daugherty, Christ, fully grown man. Bam. What happens? Original teaching of the Christ. Did he walk the earth? See, these are things about that will teach you and show you that the Christ came as a fully grown man. So anyway, there you go. Back to the subject at hand. BBC document proves, documentary proves is a very strong word. I think suggests at best. Brent Lambert, January 19th, 2017, books, history, inspiration, spirituality. So the story of the most famous person who ever lived is filled with a mysterious gaping hole. Only if you believe he was born as a baby lying in a manger. No baby, no gap, no problem. So that solves all of this problem of what did he do from the age of 13 to 29? From the age of 13 to 29, there's no biblical, Western, or Middle Eastern record of Jesus's whereabouts or activities. That's because he wasn't alive. The Bethlehem story is made up. The Christ did not appear until the mid-30s AD, and when he did appear, he appeared as a full-grown man. John the Apostle tells us that without any doubt. So this whole worry about the lost years, this gaping hole, this mystery, well, there are no lost years. There is no gaping hole. There is no mystery. The only mystery is why it's taken 2,000 years and some crazy long-haired Pentecostal evangelist to point out the fact that the Apostle John said, hey, look, Jesus was not born. The Christ was not born as a baby. The Christ came as a fully grown man. Now, it's been suggested that Jesus, and we'll just assume that they're talking about the Christ. We'll set aside the whole Jesus isn't real thing. But what about the Christ? What did the Christ do potentially before he came to Jerusalem as a fully grown man? What did the Christ do potentially after he came to Jerusalem as a fully grown man? Was he at a Tibetan Buddhist monastery? Was he, as Vedic scholars suggest, in the nation of India for a time? Was the Christ in the Americas, as the American Indians suggest? Was Christ in Central and South America, as Aztec lore suggests? Was the Christ in China and Japan, as lore suggests? Was the Christ in the north of Europe, as tradition suggests? What if I said maybe he was? For if you look at the teachings of the Christ, it is beyond question that if you look at the teachings of the Christ, you're going to find pieces of his teachings that have very strong Buddhist influence. You're going to find pieces of his teaching that have very strong Vedic influence. You're going to find pieces of his teaching that have very strong Northern European influence. You're going to find pieces of his teaching that have very strong influence from the Americas. Or is it the other way around? If the Christ came and spent 3 and some odd years in Jerusalem, ministering to the people there, who's to say he didn't spend some time in Tibet as well? Who's to say he didn't spend some time in India as well? Who's to say he didn't spend some time in the Far East? Who's to say he didn't spend some time in the north of Europe? Who's to say he didn't spend some time in the Americas? After all, he is an Elohim. He is the Word of God. He can manifest whenever, wherever, however he wants. And this makes what he said make much more sense. He said, I have come, it's presented to you by your Christian overlords, your Christian captives, your Christian wardens, your Christian prison guards as Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and nobody comes to the Father but by him. When actually what the Christ said was, I bring you the best of all the ways. I bring you the best of all the truths. And I've given you a teachings that when followed lead to life and life more abundantly, that bring peace and peace that passes all understanding, that bring life and life more abundant. And every one of those religions I've just mentioned, plus some, and maybe some that aren't even from this world, are reflected in the teachings of the Christ. So if the Christ really did go to all these other places, and maybe it's not that the teachings of the Christ reflect the influence of all these other places and all these other people and all these other faiths, but perhaps more accurately, all these other places, all these other people, all these other faiths reflect the teachings of the Christ. The Bible clearly shows that he could go where he wanted at will. He could translocate. He could beam without Scotty, wherever he wanted to go, whenever he wanted to go. Just as easily as he walked into the first century Judea around 30, 32, 33 AD and spent 3.5, 4 years there, it would be just as easy for him to show up in the Americas, just as easy for him to show up in India, just as easy for him to show up in Egypt and all of the world. And I'm convinced the more I study, and I've only had 100,000 hours of study in the Bible, so I'm still learning. I've only had 36 years of study across the spiritual spectrum, so I'm still learning. But as I see it, it's very simple. It's very easy, and it's very provable, at least in my view, that the Christ, the great avatar, went to many places and taught many things. And you know what? He probably could have been many places at the same time if he wanted to be. So there you go with that. So was Jesus a Buddhist monk? No, because Jesus never existed. We got to get that into our heads. Jesus did not exist. Could he have made this journey? Well, he could have, but why would he? If I'm an Elohim and I want to go to Kashmir, I go, boop, I'm in Kashmir. If I'm an Elohim and I'm in Kashmir and I want to go to Lhasa, I go, boop, I'm in Lhasa. I think this is speculative. I think it's a nice story, but it doesn't line up with what we know of the Elohim Christ. And yet we see that there are pieces and parts of the teachings of the Christ in many different, oh, that makes your stomach roll, in many different areas and places around the world. Very simply understood, he was God. He did what he wanted to do. He was large and in charge. He was the Christ. He was not God. Forgive me for that. So that's my evidence. Those are my thoughts. And let's go into the chat room and see what's going down in the chat room. You listen to me. If you have to leave, I understand. But since you listen to me, I should at least give you the honor of looking at your question. So here we go. There's many of the same tenets. So keen on listening to this. I discovered you about 3 months ago. Thank you. Thank you, Alice Tobolensky. It's my honor to have you here. The Christ may have gone to Kashmir when he left Jerusalem or before he went to Jerusalem. I agree with you 100%. Yogic vision. Durzo Blint, I bought your books, Reading the Last Apostle. That's probably the best place to start. Ty, yeah, that's really silly, and I think this might be a troll. We'll see. Hi, Jeff. Glad I caught you live. I'm glad you caught me live, Dana. Welcome to you. Okay, Ty, he gets gone. How come somebody didn't get rid of him for me? Wolverine Rodriguez, bye-bye. Okay. The Christ had other sheep? Absolutely. Alice is half Japanese and thinks the Christ went to Japan and changed Hinayana Buddhism to Mahayana Buddhism. That is fascinating, Alice. Fascinating. I'm going to have to look at that some more. I'm going to write that down. Pardon me for a second while I become student. So it was Hinayana to Mahayana. Mahayana. Excellent. Thank you for that tidbit. Very, very informative. There's irrefutable proof of him in the monastery of Tibet. No, sorry. It's not irrefutable. That's your opinion, I understand, but he did not live. And no, sorry. I disagree. The Elohim came to earth over and over. Absolutely, yogic vision. Hey, Jeff, I've been struggling throughout my spirituality. I was raised Catholic, and I'm starting to break the chains thanks to you. You're starting to break the chains thanks to you, Aaron. But I'm glad to be able to help you start to break those chains. Jesus, Krishna, Buddha all taught the same thing. Jesus never existed. Let me say it again. Jesus never existed. Marsden Brooks, crack ace, GTA, NCK reporter. This is one of my best theories. His teachings are in line with Buddhism and many other absolutely yogic vision. Thank you very much. Christ should be here to speak for himself. He is here to speak for himself. Are you listening? Tariq, Ali, how can one study the Bible, or should one not? I believe the Bible is about 80% dung, about 20% diamond, but those 20% are so good that I said, yes, you should study the Bible. Start with the book of John and let the Spirit lead you. The Elohim have not forgotten us. No. He is a multidimensional being, certainly. Yeshua is not even true. That's another part of the lie. Yeshua is a false enlightenment. What does Yeshua mean? It means Yahweh saves. We know Yahweh doesn't save. Yahweh kills. So Yeshua, again, is false enlightenment. It's not a real name. It's not a real person. The Christ was. Jesus wasn't real. Yeshua wasn't real. It's a false enlightenment. Don't fall for it. Gravity Storm Deborah said, for as long as she can remember, the white American Jesus Christ resonate with all the different peoples of the world is just not feasible. Absolutely, positively true, because Jesus wasn't real. Soylent Jesus' people, plastic Jesus, does not exist. What's the difference between God and Elohim? The inexpressible one created the Elohim. The Elohim created us. Hello, Dana. Jeff, was the Christ made flesh? Yes, he was. Any advice to fully break the chains of Catholicism? Yeah, walk away and never go back. Read the Isa. You can read it. I wouldn't recommend it, but it's up to you. Thank you, Milky Way. Jeff, the man, the myth, the legend. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I dreamed of the Christ. He taught you teleportation, or he thought you teleportation? Renaissance woman, if you knew how to teleport, we need to talk. Do you think he was a walk-in? No. He wasn't a walk-in, and he wasn't a meat suit either. He was a manifested Elohim. That's why he said that the kingdom of God is within. I believe fully that he was in Tibet, and they very well may have called him Isa. Nice to see you, Cody from Memphis. Mahayana Buddhism is the open way or wide path of moderation. Oh, excellent. The narrow path to the great path. Yeah, I've struggled on the I am the way, but decided to ignore it because there are other ways. Right. He didn't say I am the way, Troy. He said, I brought you the best of all the ways. He didn't say I am the truth. He said, I brought you the best of all the truths. The Christ has probably shown up many times. Not all are written about. I would agree with that 100%. Kent. CS, Hinayana is the narrow way. Okay. Yes, I heard about that, says Preshni. They have schooling records. Not everything we think we know is correct. That's absolutely correct. Greg Braden, oh boy. We're citing that source? Okay, great. Yahweh has killed millions because he's a flawed, fallen, horrible God. Hello, Jen Morris. Nice to see you. I guess I'm just going to have to block Christopher Bonilla for the time being. Bye-bye. Good afternoon. I'd like to learn more about the revolutionists that tried to inform us out of the truth. Very good. Can you speak of the evergreen? What made you decide to stop preaching? Because I realized that there was way different teachings between Paul and teachings of Christ. That was it in a nutshell. I could remember in the dream, but I can't do it when I'm awake. Excellent, Renaissance woman. Very, very interesting. The teachings of the Christ are in the Bible. Yes, they are. I appreciate your knowledge and your sharing of it. Thank you very much. Am I familiar with the Hopi prophecies? Yes. And I think that's part of probably the information that the Christ gave to them. You teleport by intention only. That makes sense. That makes sense. That makes sense. That makes great sense. So the idea here is that Jesus wasn't real. So there's no need to fill these supposed gaps of the missing years, because there weren't no missing years, because he just wasn't here. He came as a full-grown man in the mid-30s AD to Jerusalem, but it looks like he went many different places as well. Yes, you can speak to the Elohim. Speak to your higher self. You are an Elohim. You are an Elohim. So was Christ a Buddhist monk? I would say no, because he didn't spend a long enough time there to become a Buddhist monk. Did he go and influence the teachings of Buddhism? Absolutely. Revelation itself is probably closer to 90% dung, or even 95% dung. And there is no book of Revelations, by the way. There's no S on that. One of my pet peeves. I'm sorry. But I do believe the Christ probably went into other places. The end of days is nothing but Jesuit doctrine. We talked about this yesterday. Everything you know is eschatology, end of days, was created by the Counter-Reformation movement of the Jesuit church, of the Jesuit order within the Catholic Church, by Ignatius of Loyola and Francisco Ribera. So all of the end of days, rapture, anything that has to do with eschatology or end of days is false information, Jesuit information. You can choose to believe it if you like, but it's not accurate. I love me some Rex. Thanks for coming over, Aaron Cleary. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate the questions. If you're here, we welcome you very much. Sure wish we could tackle these bigger sign seekers and break up these online churches. One guy being called a troll, expressing the reality of their false preaching. Yeah, there's only so much you can do, Dave. There's only so much you can do. You just do all that you can. Jesus wasn't real. No missing years. Wasn't a Buddhist monk, but very, very, I say, undoubtedly influenced Buddhist teaching, influenced Vedic teaching, influenced the teaching of the natives in the Americas and Europe. His fingerprints, if you will, are all over most of the great teachings of the wisdoms from all over the earth. I don't know what Isa means. It's not my language. And that's how we have what we have. Martin Luther knew that it was false. And Martin Luther, see, here's what a lot of people don't understand, because these new chuckleheads like silly Marzulli and silly Scott Clark and all the rest of the evangelical movement have messed it up so bad. One of the main teachings of the Protestant Reformation was the Pope is the Antichrist. The book of Revelation is historical, not futurist. And it was the Jesuits that turned around with the Counter-Reformation movement and said, no, the Pope is not the Antichrist. Revelation is yet to be future. So everything you believe, the rapture, chopping off heads, mark of the beast, rebuilt temple, second coming, trumps, vials, all of that is Jesuit doctrine that the Protestant reformers, many of them gave their lives and shed their blood to free you from. And here we are on the 500-year anniversary of the Protestant Reformation, arguing in favor of Jesuit doctrine. Whew. It's a strange, crazy world that we live in. Love your videos. Thank you, Paul. Paul lives in the UK, saw a shooting star this morning. First time ever. Awesome. Isa means power of God in Sanskrit. Excellent. Nice to have all of you here, especially those of you that are here for the first time, and very happy to have our regular listeners with us as well. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That's the little story about the the Buddhist monk missing years, etc., etc. So in the future, when you hear teaching about the missing years and about where he was, you can kind of just mentally turn that off and think about something that's important, because there were no missing years. He wasn't here. He came as a full-grown man and influenced all the great religions of the world, and I'm convinced possibly even beyond this world. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower. I hope that you will unindoctrinate yourself. I hope that you will master your own ascension, guide your own spirit, and be your own guru. And for those of you that are here seeking after truth, I salute you. And I'll be back later with more coverage and more interesting information. And until then, stay fearless, my friends.